there's a small chapter dedicated to what was known to man, what was invented by man and things 100 years ago. And you'll be amazed at the little knowledge man had at that time. But he was provided for everything which he knew, which he wanted to know, which he wanted to employ. So coal was being discussed. What shall we do when the resources of coal are exhausted? By that time, they had not yet invented the aeroplane yes, the aeroplane was invented early this century, in the beginning of the century, in 1905 or 4. Now the point is, there was oil everywhere underneath the surfaces, but they didn't know. There was no knowledge of its existence. If at all they had any knowledge, they were unaware of its nuisance value, no more. But when the age of aeroplane came, when the age of internal combustion engines, the motor car and things, arrived, then suddenly man's attention was drawn to large resources of oil lying around him, untapped and unused. And then he knew, what could science do if the material was not there? Then come to the present age, when people really started getting worried about the exhaustion of these resources, the atomic energy came to their help. Inexhaustible stores of atomic energy. And with the atomic energy, the requirements expanded, they needed more material to sustain the intense heat, to make crucible for such intense heat and things. And new metals were discovered, new alloys were discovered, but that also had a limitation. The crucibles the science needed at the level of progress man had reached required absolutely enormous calories to be handled, of heat to be handled. So we are talking of millions maybe. Yes. But how could any metal provide that crucible? Then God guided man to the magnetic crucibles, invisible ones. And now he's capable of cooking things within an unseen crucible which is made of intense magnetic fields. Nothing can fall. You can melt things at the highest temperature and do this and that, and nothing will fall out. Don't you see the meaning of Rahman in all this?
Actually,
but
that's very clear.
These are the area. That is just one small area. I have not yet spoken on Rububiyat. What is Rabbul Alameen? It's a vast subject of ecology, of support system of life, of how the provisions, the waste product of one is utilized as provisions for life of others, and the perfect balances, and how the waste material is utilized and buried so that it becomes innocuous, it does not hurt, cannot hurt anybody. This is a science which is still completely beyond, not completely but mostly beyond the reach of scientists to understand how it's happening, how it's brought about. And when man interferes, then he comes to problems. When he makes things with his design industry, there's a problem of pollution, how to bury that waste, how to exploit the situation of the poor countries, to dump their dangerous waste on their soils, etc. These questions arise with the man-made machineries. For instance, here I also draw your attention to a simple fact which should be understandable by all the audience. We require fertilizers for all the growth on earth. because without fertilizers, the life of any form could never have developed and proceeded. Fertilizers are needed for the basic support of the vegetative growth. Now, who made those fertilizers and how? Before the advancement of science to make synthetic fertilizers by huge industry, etc. Who provided the system of water transport? Who conceived the system of purification of seawater? And also at the same time, its carriage to high mountains, to be condensed there, and then drop on the tops of mountains and flow in the direction of the plains which needed that. But what of water if there is no fertilizer? It will go waste. Now the fantastic plan, which requires the pre-existence of the wisest of planners and creators, is that the same process by which the water is filtered is responsible for the creation of electricity which is needed for all this machinery to run. When water evaporates, the very act of evaporation creates electrical charges of positive nature and negative nature. And at different levels, at different places, they change their position. Sometimes the positive electricity is left below and the negative is what rises with the clouds. In other places, the negative rises with the clouds and the positive is left below, but it is neutralized by the Earth's electrical charge. But of that we're not concerned. What we know is that all clouds are charged with immense electrical charges, so powerful that the negative and the positive can jump for hundreds of yards across. And it is that jumping of electricity which is responsible, which is essential for the condensation of vapors to small droplets. Without it, it's not possible. No amount of clouds could materialize into water, back into water, if this electricity which is generated at the very phenomenon of their rise, at the very beginning of their rise, reverses the process, and those electric charges you see, most awe-inspiring things. They are responsible not only for this, but they are the Allah's industry for producing fertilization. It's so amazing. The same electrical charges which which make the clouds revert to its original form of water, they are so powerful that they create ozone, they create other chemical changes, and the nitrogen in the air gets mixed up with hydrogen, oxygen and carbon, so that very rich fertilizers are created during the process of raining. And in one day, what this machinery of Allah creates in the way of fertilizers cannot be created in the whole year by all the industry of man. But that man-made industry has its problems of waste products. There is no waste product in that system anywhere. And yet, you don't know what rububiyat is? Without this fantastic provision of water, it is carried through winds, on the shoulders of winds in certain directions, and its fall on the mountains, and then the temperature control at the mountain is that there is always a reserve created there. Otherwise, it was not essential to build Himalayan heights or other